Dear President Metsola, dear Commissioner Dombrovskis, honourable members, a lot has happened since our last plenary discussion 2 months ago. The world around us has become even more geopolitically unstable. We are now faced with the direct and indirect consequences of developments in Iran and the Middle East. Meanwhile, none of the other challenges around us have gone away, especially as Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine continues into its 5th year. However, in the midst of the geopolitical context, Europe is continuing to pursue an ambitious economic agenda, and in fact that agenda is becoming more urgent by the day. I come to you just a few days after a European Council that took decisive action on Europe's competitiveness. In doing so, European leaders delivered on the spirit of Haldenbissen, a meeting that had provided a new momentum for the European Union's economic strategy. European leaders delivered through clear, concrete targets and with ambitious and measurable timelines. I'm talking about the One Europe, One Market agenda the European Council launched last week. This is an ambitious action plan to be implemented until the end of 2027, but mostly during this year of 2026. Let me outline some of the priorities we agreed on. We will focus on the completion of the single market, in particular by tackling the already identified terrible 10 barriers by March 27. Furthermore, leaders want to see swift progress to improve the mutual recognition of professional qualifications to ensure the mobility of workers in Europe. By the end of 2026, the leaders expect the endorsement of the Commission's newly presented proposal to create a single voluntary 28th regime for all companies wishing to adopt it to help them to operate seamlessly and with a single set of rules within the European Union. Concrete decisions are also needed by the end of the year on the Savings and Investment Union, in order to mobilize savings, increase private investment, and create a truly integrated European capital market. We also need to urgently continue with our ambitious simplification agenda to reduce existing red tape, but also ensuring that new initiatives are in line with the simplicity by design principle. Simpler rules and less gold plating my member states. This is also why European leaders have called for regulations to be favoured over directives. Beyond the single market and simplification, the European Council underlined that we need to take determined action to increase our strategic autonomy and reduce dependencies. In strategic sectors and technologies, a target and proportionate European preference is needed, and in this regard, the Industrial Accelerator Act should be agreed by the end of the year. Last but not least, it is clear that high energy prices are one of the biggest challenges for the competitiveness of the European Union. The current crisis in the Middle East and its impact on global energy supply confirm that the path we have chosen is the right one. Decarbonization and the acceleration of homegrown energy sources in a technological neutral way remain the right way forward to limit dangerous dependencies and lower energy prices in the long term. There was no ambiguity on this in last week's European Council. However, it was clear that at the same time we need to take immediate action to protect our citizens and businesses. In this regard, the Commission will present a set of temporary and targeted measures, taking into account the specific situations of member states and the particular vulnerability of certain energy-intensive industrial sectors in order to counter the risk of relocation and to protect jobs. Honourable members, in short, the One Market, One Europe agenda is ambitious, it is concrete, and it is urgent. And it represents a real policy acceleration towards a more competitive Europe. But let me be clear, this change of pace and ambition will not bear fruit without you. The Parliament, together with the Council, will be the institution turning this agenda into tangible changes and benefits for European citizens and businesses. The Parliament will have its full say in shaping these decisions. We are working together towards a common objective, a more competitive and more innovative Europe. But this agenda is much more than that. It provides the solid foundation we need to protect and develop our prosperity and our social model. It means quality jobs, it means affordability, and it means leaving no one behind as Europe deals with harsh global competition. At the same time, this economic strength is also a strategic imperative. It will allow us to eliminate harmful dependencies, to ensure our sovereignty, even when it comes at a cost, to increase and sustain our growing investment in defense, to support Ukraine as long as it takes. We need to act together to ensure that we have the economic muscle to do all this. The current geopolitical context is acting as a catalyst for our competitiveness agenda, but it is also putting our values to test. And we must continue to defend the rules-based international order and uphold the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter and our treaties. Violations of international law must not be accepted anywhere. The European Union must continue to stand firm on this. In the meeting with the United Nations Secretary-General, António Guterres, during the European Council, it was once again clear that the European Union is and will continue to be a staunch defender of multilateralism. In fact, the European Union must become one of the main driving forces of a network of multipolarity in support of multilateralism, international law, and the United Nations. That is the European Union's international vocation, and that is in the European Union's interest. Honourable members, the European Union will continue to be a force for stability, standing up for the international rules-based order. And we will take firm action to ensure our capacity to act in an unstable world. The implementation of the One Europe, One Market agenda is key in this regard, and I look forward to continue to work closely with this chamber to achieve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, President Costa. I give the floor now for the Commission to Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis. You have the floor.
Madam President, President Costa, honourable members. President von der Leyen is in Australia for the signature of the EU-Australia Security and Defence Partnership and Trade Agreement. So I will represent European Commission in today's debate. Let me begin with Ukraine. The EU remains Ukraine's biggest donor. Our total support reached 194.9 billion euros this month. Last week, 25 heads of state and government reaffirmed their continued and unwavering support to Ukraine. In December last year, the European Council took the decision to provide Ukraine with 90 billion support loan for 2026 and 27. The Commission appreciates the high level of urgency that this House has given to this file. This has allowed swift adoption of 2 of the 3 necessary legislative proposals underpinning the Ukraine support loan. We regret that the European Council could not reach the decision on the Ukraine support loan. When the European Council made the decision of support loan in December, there was one condition, that 3 countries would not participate in the loan. And this condition has been fulfilled. As President von der Leyen underlined after the European Council, and I quote, "The loan remains blocked because one leader is not honoring his word." But we will not be deterred. President von der Leyen has been very clear. We will deliver one way or another. At the same time, the Commission is progressing on the technical work for the implementation of the loan. We will be prepared to move swiftly to provide the support once there is agreement in the Council. We have already received the financial strategy from Ukraine and are working on conditions for this funding, including on the Memorandum of Understanding linked with the macrofinancial assistance program. These conditions include structural reforms to strengthen the resilience of Ukrainian economy, anti-corruption reforms, and further measures to speed up accession process and facilitate Ukraine's integration in a single market. Ukraine's future is in the EU, and our overall strategy on Ukraine remains the same: to provide maximum support to Ukraine and exert maximum pressure on aggressor Russia. The European Union is determined to continue weakening Russia's war economy, and this goal is even more important now, as we can see that Russia is benefiting from the war in Iran and the corresponding increase in the oil and gas prices. The European Commission has prepared the 20 sanctions package, and it is important to move forward with it. It focuses on further reducing Russia's energy revenues, targeting Russia's banking system, and limiting operations of its shadow fleet. We are also intensifying our engagement with international partners concerning their financial support for Ukraine. The European Council also discussed the latest developments in the Middle East, including Iran, Gaza, and Lebanon. The situation in the region is extremely serious. Developments in Iran and the wider region threaten regional and global security. We condemn Iran's indiscriminate military strikes against countries in the region. We need de-escalation and maximum restraint, the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. The European Commission stands with its partners and friends in the region in a spirit of solidarity and friendship. Cyprus has been directly impacted by this war more than any other member state. The security of Cyprus, as of any member state, is the security of the European Union. We stand firmly in support of Cyprus, and we therefore welcome the deployment by member states of military assets in the Eastern Mediterranean. The European Council also expressed its deep concern about the increase in hostilities in Lebanon and its severe impact on civilians, including large-scale displacement, suffering, and loss of life. We will continue to stand by Lebanon, its authorities, and people. The European Council also discussed the deteriorating situation in Gaza, calling on Israel to allow immediate, unimpeded access and sustained distribution of humanitarian assistance at scale into and throughout Gaza. Earlier this month, the Commission announced €458 million in humanitarian aid for Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt in 2026. The war's most immediate impact on Europe is through energy. The Council called on the Commission to present a toolbox for targeted temporary measures to address the recent spikes in the prices of imported fossil fuels arising from the crisis in the Middle East. The Commission will act across all four components that determine electricity prices. First, on energy costs themselves. Member States can already make use of state aid measures to compensate for the cost increases of energy, and the Commission will further flexibilize the use of state aid for this purpose. Second, on grid charges. The Commission will prepare a legal proposal to improve the productivity of grid infrastructure and allow Member States to reduce grid charges for energy-intensive industries. Third, on taxes and levies. The Commission will propose to mandate lower tax rates on electricity and to make sure that electricity is taxed less than fossil fuels. And fourth, on carbon pricing. The emission trading system is working and delivering on its promise to massively reduce gas consumption. But we need to modernize it and make it more agile. We are preparing measures, including updating the benchmarks for free allocations and take into account concerns of industry, increasing the firepower of Market Stability Reserve to reduce price volatility, and this will be followed by the broader review of the ETS system. The Commission will continue to report to the Council on the potential impact of recent developments for the EU in terms of energy security and energy prices, supply chains and migration, and will propose appropriate measures. Energy is just one element of Europe's overall competitive position. Leaders also discussed how to further deepen the single market. To this end, the Commission will soon present its One Europe, One Market roadmap. The roadmap will set out key legislative measures with a very clear timeline, targets, milestones for delivery by the end of 2027. Last week, the Commission presented the proposal for the EU Inc. This is a foundation and starting point for the EU's 28th regime. This makes it easier, faster and cheaper for our companies to start, scale and do business across the EU. Here we count on co-legislators to swiftly proceed with the adoption of this file. Our simplification agenda continues apace. The European Council called on the Commission, the co-legislators and Member States to continue ambitiously simplify rules and reduce administrative burdens at the EU, national and regional level. We have set an ambitious target of 25% cut in administrative burdens for all businesses and 35% for SMEs. Last year, the Commission tabled 10 omnibus proposals. These proposed measures have potential for 15 billion euros reduction of recurring administrative costs and 6 billion euros in one-off savings. These are real savings that contribute to boosting the competitiveness of EU companies. The European Council called on the co-legislators to agree all pending omnibus proposals before the end of 2026. This year, more than half of legislative initiatives in the Commission's work programme have a strong simplification focus. This means that they must deliver net administrative savings. In addition to further omnibus proposals, the Commission will introduce simplicity by design approach to future rules so that we improve the governance and development of legal texts. Finally, in the broader context of a further deteriorating geopolitical environment and Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine remaining an existential challenge for the European Union, the European Council also reaffirmed its determination to decisively ramp up Europe's defence readiness by 2030. The leaders also took stock of the progress on migration and held a lunch with UN Secretary General Guterres. And finally, leaders decided that the discussions on the next multi-annual financial framework would be postponed to the informal meeting of heads of state and government on 23rd and 24th of April in Cyprus. To conclude, honourable members, we must continue to act with determination and focus to address challenges we face. This is the only way that we can ensure that Europe remains resilient, prosperous and sovereign in a rapidly changing world. Thank you, and I look forward for today's debate.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Dombrovskis. I'll now start with the speakers on behalf of the political groups, starting with the EPP group, Dolores Montserrat.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President, Council, President, Commissioner. The European Council has made it very clear. There's no government defending this war, but there's only one government, Sanchez, which is using it for electoral propaganda. We're concerned about stability, security and peace. It's very clear to Europe who our partners are and who constitutes a threat. The Iranian regime represses its own people, and especially women, and it's a threat to the Middle East. It's an authoritarian regime, and it is responsible for this collapse in the Middle East. The EU cannot only look on and react. So we're pleased to hear this call for greater competitiveness from Council. We need to eliminate obstacles, simplify, ensure that we truly have a single market, because a lot of the barriers Europe faces are internal. It's because we have 27 different national legislations, and so we have practices which hinder integration. So we're pleased to see the 28th regime. We need less red tape for greater competitiveness, turning Europe into the best place in the world for entrepreneurship, investment and growth. We can grow from crises. We've done it in the past. We can grow in terms of our strategic autonomy and our resilience and independence in the world with cheaper energy too, so that we can compete with the giants. The EPP will be at the forefront of that progress, as it has been in the past, because Europe cannot afford another decade of indecision. It's a clear choice now: fragmentation or integration, delay or integration, 27 different national systems or a true single market. Europe's time has come. Europe can write its own history, not sit back and wait for others to help, not end up carrying around a begging bowl, but taking decisions for itself.
The floor to the chair of the S&D group, Irache Garcia Perez.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. How much more destruction do we need for us to face up to reality? How much more evidence do we need to denounce an illegal war that never should have started? Mrs. Montserrat, the commitment and efforts being made to try and say that Mr. Sanchez is alone show that you're denying reality. Those who are more and more isolated are you. Prime Minister Sanchez has become the person who leads a clear response of European citizens in defending multilateralism and international law, because 1 month ago, Trump promised a rapid war, a war that would last 4 years. But where is the freedom for the Iranian people, which everyone wanted to see? What's the result? The dictatorship of the Ayatollahs hasn't fallen, but over 4,000 Iranians have. More than 1,000 civilians in Lebanon, 800,000 displaced people. Gaza continues to be destroyed in silence. Iran is attacking the Gulf states. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, and the world is facing an energy crisis which is unprecedented in nature. That's the result. Those who have so far been silent, are they going to call out Trump and Netanyahu's violations of international law? Yes or no? Silence is complicity. And make no mistake, this war is not only destroying people's lives over there, it's also affecting our citizens here. Oil has reached $120 per barrel, gas $60 per megawatt. And with the increase in energy prices, we're seeing inflation, a collapse in consumption, businesses are shutting down, and we're seeing more unemployment and inequality. And in the midst of this tragedy, we hear Trump saying, well, if the oil price goes up, it's better for the US. But who does he mean? Does he mean families who can't fill up their petrol tanks? Does he mean workers who see their shopping getting more expensive? No, he means big oil, because that's the uncomfortable truth. This is a war that benefits the few and impoverishes the majority. And that's why we say enough, enough hypocrisy, enough looking the other way, because we have to protect our families and our SMEs before it's too late. We have to say it loud and clear. Dismantling the Green Deal, like the Popular Party and the fake far-right patriots want, is not a solution, it's the problem. It would mean condemning us to continue to be dependent on fossil fuels that fund wars. The only way out is to speed up the green transition, renewables, strategic autonomy, clean energy. We will not have this crisis used as an excuse to weaken the emissions trading system. Do not dismantle it. Don't shift the cost of pollution onto citizens. And while we're talking about responsibilities, we shouldn't ignore those who are blocking European solidarity. Orban's veto on the 90 billion loan to Ukraine is shameful. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe cannot be held hostage by external autocrats or their internal accomplices. Europe was not created to prostrate itself to the powerful. If we don't defend our principles when they're really put to the test, then we're no longer what we say we are, because peace is not weakness. Peace is the greatest possible act of political courage, and Europe has to measure up. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now on behalf of the PFE group to King Agal.
Elnök asszony, elnök úr, biztos úr. Mi patrióták azt várjuk.
Thank you very much. We patriots expect the Commission and the Council finally to make decisions that ensure the safety of European citizens. We expect them to protect citizens against terrorist and anti-Semitic acts, against a potential new wave of migration, and to guarantee Europe's energy security, but it's not happening. The energy crisis caused by the conflict in the Middle East is only exacerbated by the deliberate shutdown of the Druzhba oil pipeline by the Ukrainians, seriously jeopardizing the energy supply of Hungary and Slovakia. Therefore, we're pained to see that Europe is not standing in support of these two countries, and there's been no clear condemnation of the death threats directed at the Hungarian Prime Minister and his family from the Ukrainians, nor has there been any public outcry over the fact that Hungary's foreign minister is being wiretapped. There would have been an outcry if it had been somebody from another country. They openly want a change of government in Hungary to remove the Prime Minister who stands up for national interests, so they believe that anything goes, whether it be withholding funds, blackmail, an oil blockade, threats or wiretapping. Today, 18 days before the election, the Commission decided that Hungary alone, a neighbour of a country at war, will be excluded from funds intended to strengthen Europe's defence. What is this if not open interference in the Hungarian elections? The European Commission is becoming completely discredited. We patriots will grow even stronger on April the 12th in Hungary.
Of the ECR group to its co-chair, Patrick Jaki.
Dziękuję Pani Przewodnicząca, Panie Komisarzu.
Well, thank you very much, President, Commissioner, President of the Council. At the Council summit, you lost a good opportunity to cut out this cancer, which is ETS. When ETS was introduced, the cost was 15 euro per ton. Now it's 60 euro per ton. It was supposed to lead to energy transformation, to lower energy prices. So let me ask you, what now? When ETS was being introduced, the average gross price was 40 euro for 1 megawatt hour. Now it's 80 euros, so a lot more. When ETS was being introduced, an average price for households was 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Now it's 29, 100% more. So let me ask you this. Did you give us cheaper energy or more expensive? Before we had ETS, the EU was economic global power comparable to the US. Now, per capita income in the US, which rejected this crazy energy policy. Now, the US is twice as rich as we are. We were supposed to be richer, we are poorer. We were supposed to have cheaper energy, we have almost the most expensive energy in the world. We were supposed to be more competitive, well, less competitive, and our industry is being destroyed because of what we have done. We were supposed to be an example and lead others to lower emissions elsewhere. So what is happening? Other parts of the world are taking over our industry and they emit even more CO2. So let's call spade a spade. ETS and your whole green policy is a dead man walking. We are rejecting this fact. We are trying to put some makeup on that zombie, put a skirt on it and send it to a ball. No, Europe deserves a free market of energy, free of ideology and ideology-driven taxes. We could be competitive again.
Thank you. I give the floor to the chair of the Renew Europe Group, Valérie Hayer.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner, President. You've talked about the competitiveness roadmap and progress made there. You can count on Renew's full support for that, as ever. But there's something else I wanted to mention about this European Council. It was supposed to be about clarity, robust unity. We're faced with a war in Ukraine, external pressures. The EU should have been speaking with one voice. But it's not what happened, is it? Once again, because within our EU, one member state deliberately decided to block our collective response, to block our helping hand to Ukraine. I'm talking about Viktor Orban's Hungary, not just defending its own interests in its words, but sabotaging the entire EU. And to whose benefit? Vladimir Putin's benefit, nobody else. It was our suspicion, but now it is clear with the Hungarian foreign minister. So, President, what we need to say now is that we're not talking about reaching agreements or not reaching agreements. We're talking about a vital political question for the EU. How can we be credible on the world stage if we've got people stabbing us in the back right within our own house? And how can we be taken hostage by one national government? Now, things may change on the 12th of April. They may turn the page on Viktor Orban, but that won't solve the problem of unanimity, because that rule paralyses us. It weakens us, and worse, it exposes us to external influence. Dear fellow members, we need to be brave enough to say this clearly. Our institutions are vulnerable. People find their way round foreign powers, weaseling their way in to destroy us from the inside. So let us sound the alarm. Patriots say they're defending sovereignty, but they're actually defending Putin, Trump or Xi Jinping. AfD, Rassemblement National, Fidesz, Vox, Chega, whether they be voting together with ECR or others, when they have these votes against Russian sanctions, when they are supporting Trump and US online conglomerates that don't want the DSA, they're not defending the people of Europe then, are they? They're defending foreign interests at the expense of the people of Europe. And that would be considered treason, consorting with the enemy in a national context. So we need to do that at EU level too. Let's stop being so naive. When we hear these disgusting revelations about spying, about espionage going on, and journalists being stifled, we need to act.
On behalf of the Green Group, it's co-chair Terry Reintke.
Colleagues, Orban blocking urgently needed European support for Ukraine. Trust me, millions of Europeans are asking themselves how much longer the European Union and especially the member states will just let this happen. And honestly, maybe some of the right of EPP think that what Orban is blocking is a left and green agenda. But this is nonsense. It is your agenda. It is EPP's agenda, your political demands, your credibility that Orban attacks every single day. And quite successfully, I must say, as you stand there and let it happen. And more than that, you cooperate with these people. The people on the far right are not your potential allies. They are your political enemies. They despise what you have built in the European Union. They want to destroy your political movement, your political legacy, yet still you work with them. After this European Council, everyone must ask themselves, when will you finally make a cut in working with these people instead of moving ever closer to all of those who do not only betray Ukraine, but Europe and everybody who believes in democracy and freedom? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reintke. Now, on behalf of the Left Group, I give the floor to Özlem Demirel.
Dankeschön, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, President. When the US bombed Iraq and other countries, they said it was because of toxic gas. Current bombing of Iran is being justified by the idea that the country has nuclear arms. That is obviously a lie. Iran doesn't have any, Israel does. It's not a matter of democracy or human rights. It's a matter of creating a new order in the Middle East. Israel is escalating the war in Lebanon. The US wants to defend its global dominance. And populations worldwide are paying for this destruction, death, and higher prices. Nobody is saying anything to the US or Israel, and everybody is blaming Iran. That is having two different yardsticks. We could stop delivering to Israel. You could terminate the cooperation with Israel. You're complicit in this war. It is a case of two different measures.
To the chair of the ESN Group, René Aust.
Benzin und
petrol and diesel cost more than €2 here and now. Everyone says it's because of the Iran crisis. That's partially true, but it's only half true. What no one's saying is that Brussels has already decided that in 2028 the CO2 price will go up again. Citizens and businesses will have to pay more for energy again. Experts think that a litre of petrol is going to cost 40 cents more. We're soon going to be paying €2 per litre of petrol, €3 at some point, and that's no surprise. This is something that mainstream political parties have done, and it's something they want. All the main parties, the CDU, the Greens, the Socialists, they're preparing the next increase in prices. But we say, no, citizens have paid enough. The prices need to go down immediately. That's what the European Council should be discussing. They shouldn't be talking about world politics. They should be putting individual citizens' concerns at the heart of what they do. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Paolo Cunha, 1.5 minutes.
As we see fossil fuel prices shooting up, we see a major immediate impact on supply chains and ultimately the prices of products and services. So as we see these external shocks, we have a systemic difficulty which is very hard to tackle nationally. The EU needs to coordinate, show solidarity and cooperate rapidly. This energy shock is also due to the fact that we were proceeding towards a decarbonisation of energy and doing away with our dependence on fossil fuel in order to achieve energy sovereignty and autonomy. But that was an incomplete process. So we now need to ensure that we are ever more committed to that path, to achieve that energy transition. We need a gradual reduction in energy dependency on Russia. The war in the Middle East could also spur us on to achieve our strategic autonomy and energy independence. Portugal has done a lot with infrastructure through renewable sources, for instance, which are now 80%, accounting for 80% of electricity production in Portugal in 2025. The grid can be boosted throughout Europe in such a way as to increase our energy autonomy.
1 minute.
Thank you very much, President. Well, I decided not to read up my speech. I want to speak more freely because I really think what Council President Costa said was so important. We are living in challenging times. Europe is threatened. We have war around us. The war in Ukraine is threatening us as well. But I do believe that there is hope. Yesterday we had an election in Denmark. 12 parties were elected to the parliament, a very fragmented political landscape. I'm happy to say that my prime minister was doing well. My party is the biggest, but we are divided on a lot of questions. But yet we have decided that we want to sit down, find political solutions together. Because we need to work together. We need to solve the problems people have, and we need to have peace. But the only way to deliver on that is that we find ways to working together. And therefore, I have to say that Hungary needs to come into the fight. We need to have them on board, but they have to realize that we need to help Ukraine, for instance. But we need to work together. Otherwise, we will not solve the problems. And I think that I'm happy to say that Denmark can maybe be the role model for how we do it in Europe. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Penel.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Penel.
Dans les conclusions du Conseil.
In the Council conclusions from the 19th of March, it states that we have to reduce our dependencies. Who are they trying to fool? After the terrible Mercosur treaty that was imposed by the European Commission, now, on the 24th of March, we have a free trade agreement that's been signed with Australia. And as was the case for the South American treaty, it's our farmers who are going to pay the price. 25,000 tons of beef, lots of powdered milk, butter, etc. It's all going to be imported from Australia now. The European Commission is organising the death of our agriculture, the constraints placed on our farmers, these trade agreements, and the future CAP budget confirm that. A few days ago, the European Commission recognised that reducing the share of nuclear energy was a, I quote, strategic error. How long will it take? How many years will it take for the European Union to recognise the massive error that's being made, i.e. undermining our food sovereignty and increasing our dependencies? Anger is increasing in the countryside against your policies. We warned you.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Fidanza.
Thank you. Mr. Fidanza now, please.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, President Costa, colleagues. The EU is under pressure on several fronts, and we can't afford slow or ideological responses. The crisis in the Middle East is calling us to urgently take action because we've seen critical raw materials, energy and trade affected generally, even internal security and new migration flows are on the horizon. So we need to react now, not with the kind of crazy way we reacted to the flows from Syria in 2015. We need to ensure that there are negotiations to end Iran's nuclear ambitions. The EU has to be brave, defend energy security for its citizens and the competitiveness of European businesses. And for that reason, I think the Italian government's initiative has been extremely helpful. 10 other countries have signed up to that. The way in which we tackle ETS in order to help with energy bills is something that is subject to a lot of variation from one member state to another, but it's unsustainable in many cases. And taking this together with CBAM, we end up with a double whammy that means you have a kind of environmental tax, which is only encouraging offshoring of our industry and bringing us to our knees. So, national intervention to neutralise the ETS impact on energy bills, and we need to do away with the ideological blind worship of the Green Deal as an aim in itself. We need to look at the ETS crisis. We need to change direction. And in July, when the Commission is looking at the free quotas for renewables, they need to be brave in defending core industries and showing determination when they tackle financial speculation on carbon-emitting quotas. The clock is ticking, and we're seeing too much red tape, too much ideology, and citizens can't cope.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Conclusions of the Council regarding competitiveness in the single market, one Europe, one market. I certainly welcome the commitments in the areas of the 28 regime and deepening the single market and removing obstacles to our competitiveness and innovation. Reference was made to our dependency on energy, and listening to the debate here, I think we live in parallel universes. The people who are complaining about our moves to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels are the same people that have been championing Orban and Putin inside in this chamber, and even more recently, President Trump. The fact of the matter is the increase in energy prices are primarily because of the war in Ukraine that Putin started 5 years ago, and in the context of Netanyahu and President Trump invading Iran. They are simple, indisputable facts. The idea that we would be more dependent on fossil fuels simply would mean that we would have craven people like Orban, who would be kowtowing consistently to Putin, trying to ensure that he can receive cheap oil and gas from that dictatorship. It is clearly important that we stand firm with the people of Ukraine, with the government of Ukraine, in providing the €90 billion loan for 2026 and 2027, and more importantly, that we deal with people who are treacherous to the principles and the values of this particular Parliament, of the European Union in general, and the people of the European Union. It is shameful that people are justifying Orban's most recent kowtowing to Putin. It is a sinful, shameful act of treason to the European values.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Toussaint. Ladies and gentlemen, our dependence on fossil fuels destroys the climate and is extremely expensive for European citizens. When we see the prices on the pump, we can see this very clearly. With the Green Deal, we took a step towards a reduction of the use of gas, and this is not the time to backtrack on that. The European Commission is now suggesting that we develop new fossil infrastructure for close to €80 billion and to finance ISMAD and others which are involved in the war between Israel and Gaza. Less than half will actually be for Bamak and other natural programs. We could relaunch the Green Deal. We could demand 100% sovereign, 100% green investment. Thank you.
Als nächster spricht.
The next speaker is Ms. Serra Sanchez.
Señorías. Thank you, President. Honourable members, Venezuela invaded due to oil. The Strait of Hormuz is burning. The illegal actions of the head of state of the United States and Israel are leading us into a crisis like the one we saw in the 70s, with oil going up to over $120 the barrel, with electricity getting more expensive. And who's paying? Well, not you, not the CEOs of the big oil companies. The same people, as always, are paying the price. Ordinary people and families. In Spain, oil is at over €2 a litre. And in the meantime, people are cozying up to Trump to try and do business. And you're trying to reduce taxes on people doing that. There is a minority that is getting rich off the back of these crises. And you're responsible for that. You're responsible for the genocide against the Palestinian people and in Lebanon. You're responsible for the war. And you are responsible for this crisis. What's at stake is the future of our people. And you've caused that just to obey Netanyahu and Trump. And we will say this as many times as it's necessary. No to war, no to NATO.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Nicolau Alavanos.
At the Council, the European Union once again parroted the false pretext of the US and Israel regarding the dirty war in Iran that's escalating, but they're leaving the possibility of providing even more support than already with the Shields operation. But at the heart of all of this are interests in energy routes and markets, investments in the Palestinian Riviera through displacement of Palestinians, the reconstruction of Ukraine, the Indian route in opposition to competitive plans by China and Russia, as well as the US. And we condemn the New Democracy government and other parties labelling our country's dangerous involvement in the war, with patriots in Saudi Arabia, frigates in the Red Sea, and dozens of US NATO bases, all potential targets for retaliation. Close the bases now and bring back the armed forces which have been sent abroad. And we express our solidarity with the peoples of Iran, Palestine, Cuba and Lebanon. The Greek people and all the peoples of Europe are already bleeding for the EU's war economy. They shouldn't be dragged into the slaughter of war, and they shouldn't pay the price of war. No sacrifices for the profits of war. We have to escalate workers' and people's struggle. Greece's disengagement from imperialist war plans from NATO and the EU, and people in control.
Thank you. Mr. Gahler is the next speaker. Madam President, colleagues, as so often recently, this European Council that was primarily supposed to be focusing on increasing competitiveness was overtaken by reality. When an American president is how he is, when aims, methods and arguments are changed, like a shirt every day. There's no point in the EU trying to race behind this or try to interpret something into this or discover any logic in the reasoning when it maybe doesn't exist. The war in Iran isn't our war. We are not participating. We were not consulted. And had we been consulted, we would have tried to dissuade those involved. But, of course, we are seeing the impact of this war very clearly at our petrol stations. And we feel solidarity with the Iranian people who have been suffering for decades under the Iranian regime. But we cannot, unfortunately, feel any hope that the people will be relieved by this attack from the air. We also feel solidarity with those who are now falling victim to the retaliation of the Iranian regime in the region. And we shouldn't be surprised, by the way, by this response. So thank you for having addressed the situation in Gaza. For the sake of completeness, you should also have mentioned the unacceptable behaviour of radical settlers in the West Bank. This is not a contribution to the peace process. But I'm grateful to you for the clarity with which you have given the position of the EU on Ukraine, and you know what the position of this Parliament is. Ms. Kellermans has the floor.
Vendredi, les 27 chefs d'État et de gouvernement.
On Friday, the 27th heads of state and government examined the outcome of the attacks launched by the United States and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Council called to de-escalate on all sides. But just saying that this war isn't our war is not enough. We need to speak out strongly against this war, even if this war is striking at the heart of a bloody dictatorship. This war is having an impact across the whole of the region, the whole of the world, and indeed Europe as well. The risk to our energy supply are colossal. And that energy supply is crucial when it comes to our strategic autonomy, when it comes to protecting and safeguarding our industries and our jobs, and to guarantee affordable energy for all. We cannot accept simply throwing up our hands when it comes to finding a solution at EU level. We need harmonised action. And this crisis, furthermore, has demonstrated that decarbonisation is a major issue, and we must enhance what we are doing on that with social measures to provide support where necessary and to ensure that households and businesses have the support they need to move forward on that.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Deutsch.
Brüsszel és Kijev is durván beavatkozik a magyar választásokba.
Brussels and Kiev are getting very much involved in Hungarian elections. It's a disgrace and it's illegal. They are financing the campaign for the opposition TSAG party, and from Kiev there is support and threats also against the Prime Minister, and Zelensky and you have the aim of bringing down the Hungarian government. You want a puppet government in Hungary. In the last few days, we've also seen that Magyar Péter and buddies got together with a journalist spy who has been listening in to the foreign minister using tapping methods. And the journalist also said that he had gone into an agreement with Magyar Péter in order to influence specific decisions if the government is overthrown. We will defend Hungary with all means, and there will be consequences post the elections.
Siepe. Bitte schön, Kollege Siepe, 66, bitte.
Mr. Siepe, you have the floor.
Ich glaube, es könnte passieren, dass ich noch
I might have to ask a follow-up. Colleague, I often wondered if you actually speak German, because it's your name. Anyway, sorry. Colleague, today we have discussed the ideas and mental confusion of the US President Donald Trump. In your speech, I recognized some of the narrative that we usually hear from him. So I was wondering what you were just doing now. Was this a preparation for preparing a story about a stolen election when Mr. Orban loses? Or is this kind of reverse psychology because for years Mr. Orban has been manipulating elections, and now in a sort of Trumpian way you want to sort of blame all of this on the democratic opposition?
Kedves képviselő úr, az élet az...
Well, dear colleague, life isn't a John le Carré spy story. It sounds great, what you've just been saying, but the truth is somewhat different. The biggest opposition party in Hungary is working together with someone who claims to be a journalist, but actually is part of the Secret Service, who works together with the foreign forces and has tapped the Hungarian foreign minister. I'm surprised you're not horrified by that.
Yes.
So if there is this brilliant spy that you're talking about, when he's so brilliant, why do you know that he's a spy?
Tudja, kedves képviselő úr.
Well, my dear colleague, I'm really sorry. Really sorry that you're joking about the fact that the foreign minister of a sovereign state, a member of the EU, is listened into by the secret services from outside. If that happened elsewhere, we, as the patriots, would be the first to protest. Now, what happened is that there was a recording that was published where this person who claims to be a journalist but actually is part of the secret services, is a secret agent, and he said that he had tapped the phone of the foreign minister.
It does not have to be a question. It can also be a comment. I learned something every day myself. So, der nächste Redner ist der Kollege Vondra.
The next speaker is Mr. Vondra.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to admit one thing. Our problem is not the climate. Our problem is our weakness. Our problem are that we are losing the competitiveness. And to correct this, we need two things. To have the lower prices of electricity and energy in the short term and nuclear embarrassment in the strategic long term. And here we have a problem. On nuclear, I welcome the admission of Ursula von der Leyen that abandonment of nuclear was a strategic mistake. If this is a strategic mistake, we should correct this. I asked Madame Ribera a week ago when you will submit the delegated act as a commission to put equal feeder, and no response. So again, I am asking, when do you do this? And on ETS, we really need a serious reform, not a cosmetic one. So please, we must do this now, and we must do a deep reform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Gebrandi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Costa, Commissioner, the world today requires Europe to develop into something it is not yet. Develop into a political giant, develop into a military force, and develop into the most innovative economy with high-tech and very low energy prices. Development. For that, we look at our heads of state. The European Council shall, and I quote the European Treaty, provide the Union with the necessary impetus for its development. And this responsibility is not met. National short-term interests damage European strength. Corrupt national governments frustrate decision-making, and countries that fall behind economically ask the EU to weaken its standards, pulling it down. That is not development, that is paralysis. President Costa, please pick up the current challenge. Work with those member states that want a stronger, more united Europe, and make Europe develop into what is so badly needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleague Gerbrandy, there is a blue card by Mr. Smith. Do you accept it? 30 seconds, 158.
Meneer Gerbrandy. Mr. Gerbrandy, it's odd to hear you talking about European action, but your cabinet is sitting on its hands. They're not doing anything in this crisis. Companies, households, you're not doing anything for them. How can this happen? We have the danger of distorted competition in the EU, and this is due to the inaction of your own government. So get to work with your party, with your coalition partners in the minority cabinet, and come forward with support measures in the threatening crisis, because we're running out of gas. Nuclear energy has been on hold for years. We are facing a serious crisis. And my question to you is, what actions are you proposing?
Ja, dank u, voorzitter.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for this question, particularly coming from someone whose party was recently in the cabinet. a cabinet that's only been in office for 4 weeks is not responsible for empty gas storage. That is the responsibility of the coalition that your party was in. And it makes absolutely no sense to start adopting all sorts of compensatory measures at the petrol pump. You know as well as I do that rich people are the ones who are profiting most from such compensation. So we need targeted measures, and the only genuine solution, which is to switch to sustainable energy, renewable energy, as soon as possible, because Spain is much better shielded from the effect of rising fossil fuel prices than the rest of Europe.
Please, 30 seconds. 158, micro, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's wel bizar.
Yeah, well, that's odd to hear this, because the previous cabinet wasn't actually in office when the biggest energy crisis ever hit that Shell has been warning about for some time. You're talking about targeted measures, but where are they? The Fisher fleet is confined to port. They can't afford to go fishing. So do something. I'm not talking about just generic measures. I'm saying that we need to do something about the unlevel playing field in Europe. So what about targeted support for the Fisher fleet? What about support for farmers when food security is in danger? Our food sovereignty is also at stake here. Madam President, I think you're repeating what you already said. I think the only thing that really helps is what was in the Green Deal that you couldn't take seriously. In other words, energy efficiency, energy saving, that is the most important measure to be shielded against this kind of price shocks. As long as the EU is so dependent on fossil fuels that come from outside Europe, no emergency measures are going to provide any structural relief. So embrace the Green Deal finally, and let's work together on having much lower energy prices for everybody, including fishermen. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. van Lanschot.
So, colleagues, Trump demands that we follow him into war. International law is ignored. Again. Groceries are more expensive. Businesses struggle with high energy prices. A tank of gas costs more than ever. And the profits are flowing directly into Putin's pockets. All because of another reckless war the US government started. And that same United States raises tariffs, threatens to invade Greenland, and has a security strategy that aims to destroy the EU. And now, that same United States demands our help? Well, if you want our help, act like the ally we once knew. Support Ukraine, show some respect for international law, and stop this destructive war. Europe, these are things we can demand when we are united. We can achieve so much more without a veto, without a traitor wannabe dictator in Hungary. Let's create a United States of Europe and speak with one voice. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Ressler.
Hvala, potpredsjednice, poštovani predsjedniče Europskog vijeća.
Madam President, President of the Council, colleagues, the reshuffle we are seeing in Europe requires more political determination, more courage and more self-respect for our continent. At a time when dangerous wars are taking place in our neighbourhoods, where we are seeing hybrid threats to our territory, blackmail, now more than ever we must stand united around clear measures to ensure the independence of our continent. We need to invest in our defence, in our resilience, and in protecting our external borders. Resilience also includes enhancing the competitiveness of the EU. Our businesses, our entrepreneurs need less red tape, a strengthened single market, and more room for growth, for investment, and for innovation. Then there is the matter of migration. This is still one of the crucial issues of our time. For some weeks now, Europe's determination is being tested. There is increasing migratory pressure on our continent. We are facing more and more people who are undocumented in Europe and indeed enter Europe without papers. And our citizens need answers from us. And this is an opportunity for us this week to give them that answer in the shape of the Returns Directive.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Ruijten.
Colleagues, Trump's policies once again derailed European security. Rising oil prices, sanction relief, dwindling deliveries of military aid to Ukraine are risks for Ukraine and thus also risks for us. Meanwhile, the member states' inability to deliver the loan to Ukraine is frankly appalling. They should have avoided giving Putin's Budapest assets the chance to block. They opted for easy. Narrow, short-term national interests once again mean we lack a strong European solution. The illegal and botched Iran war learns us Trump's so-called peace negotiators are only interested in own financial gain. Please, Council, abandon naive beliefs that this approach can end Russia's aggression. Form a united front. Take serious action against Putin's assets in Council. Provide Ukraine with deep strike capability and an air protection zone over uncontested areas. Crack down on European companies still benefiting and enabling Putin's war and deliver the loan to Ukraine through whatever means necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Wilimski.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, whether this is a debate over the Council, if it's a parliamentary debate, well, that's one thing. The question is, how can we, and when I say we, I mean the EU Commission and the left here in this Parliament, how can we prevent Viktor Orban not being elected again, and this 90 billion, how can we ensure that it goes to our friend Zelensky? This is completely the wrong way, and the reproaches against Viktor Orban and the Hungarians become more and more absurd. For example, the foreign minister and contacts with other foreign ministers. Of course he has to have contacts. Obviously, Orban himself probably has contacts in the White House as well. Remember the photos where he was sitting there in the White House because he had an exclusive meeting with the US president, whereas other heads of state, Merz, Macron and von der Leyen, were sitting here and weren't being taken seriously. So I will appeal to you, stop manipulating Hungary and its voters and stop refusing them money. Let them have free, uninfluenced votes. No one knows better what is good for Hungary than the Hungarians themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Smith.
Mevrouw de voorzitter.
Madam President, Commissioner, fuel and energy prices are through the roof. Our fishers and farmers have their backs against the wall. The EU needs to act and act quickly. The minority cabinet in the Netherlands is doing nothing while other countries are taking support measures for their fishermen and for farms. Our government is just waiting and seeing. Commission needs to ensure that we don't have competition distortion developing in the EU so that the Dutch citizens don't become the victims of their lazy government. So I call on the Council and Commission to come forward with a coordinated European programme for national support measures, in particular for the stranded fishers' fleet. And please suspend the ETS, review the ETS, have free emission rights for our industry, and don't forget the threatening crisis with regard to fertilizers. We're going to see shortages in artificial fertilizer because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Give farmers more opportunities to use animal dung so that they can use this. Our food security requires urgent action. Please get to work on this straight away today. Thank you. I now give the floor to Mr. Cotrim de Figueiredo.
Vielen Dank, Frau Vorsitzende. Mr. Commissioner, President Costa. O Conselho Europeu da semana passada inovou numa...
The European Council last week was innovative in one respect. It now has specific plans and not just a set of intentions. That's clear, but now it's about implementing those plans and indeed implement them swiftly. It's important to be swift when it comes to energy, defence, industrial policy. And it was clearly stated that fragmentation and obstacles within the single market are the main driver of our lagging behind. And this, and it must be said, this is the fault of the member states. They still haven't realised that their success depends on the European project and not just what they do in the national sphere. We need to focus in now on the EU and on our market, and it's time for us to really zoom in on strategic autonomy. It's something that we defend a lot, but that shouldn't be used as an excuse to uphold nationalism. We need to ensure that there are no subsidies that distort fair competition, for instance. The Council is calling for a European preference, but I think that a European success is what we ought to be striving for, and that's about having businesses that work well within a true single market. If our businesses were really competitive, they wouldn't require any kind of protection. And if our businesses are not competitive, then there's no protection that can help them. We need to make sure that we do so without harming the taxpayers.
Thank you. I give the floor to Mr. Lopatka.
President, ladies and gentlemen, in their conclusions, but also at the start of this session, President Metzola, like the heads of state and government, correctly said that the war in Iran and the attack on the Gulf states, of course, is not a regional crisis. These are a stress test not only for Europe, but for the entire global economy. So they are threatening not only our energy supply, but they are also triggering debates about how we can correctly react to this type of situation and a dictatorial regime as we have in Iran. What can our answer be? We have to work more closely together with the Gulf states. It's not only about free trade agreements, it's really about establishing strategic partnerships, because in the energy field in particular, we will continue to need that region. And we can see that here in Europe, we have a real problem in terms of energy prices. And energy is not a privilege, it's a necessity. So we need to have a reliable, solid partnership with the Gulf states. That's the right answer to the totalitarian regime in Iran, and we have to give that answer.
Thank you very much. We now come to the Catch the Eye round. 6 people have asked for the floor, but only 5 I can see in the chamber. We actually have 2 renew requests, but we're going to allow that as it's Mr. Sieper's first plenary as a renew member. And I'll give the floor first of all to Mr. López Aguilar.
Danke, Frau Präsidentin. Querido Presidente Costa, Comisario Dombrovskis.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, President of the Council. There are 2 elephants in the room here in this debate on the Council conclusions. The first of these elephants is the war in Iran, which has an impact not just on the Middle East, but the EU and indeed the whole world. We need to call a spade, Commission and Council. You're talking about an illegal war, and Trump and Netanyahu are the ones who caused that war. And the second elephant in the room is the disastrous social impact of this war on families, on SMEs, on businesses. And that's why we need to speed up the green transition. We need to speed up our decarbonisation of the EU economy. We need to cut off that dependence on toxic fossil fuels. We need to strengthen social protection. And this all links back to the EU's commitment to international law. And that really is the foundational pillar of the EU. And in addition, the social pillar is foundational to the European identity, and we must strive to uphold that.
Das Wort erhält nun der Kollege
Thank you. And now our colleague Tinkanen and our colleagues. I should have practiced this beforehand. Arege Choitiar Martinez should get ready.
Dear President, last week we saw the true face of the EU again. The face of a coward that hides behind diplomacy because it lacks the guts to act when it matters. You once again criticized military intervention in Iran while hiding behind the very security this intervention outcomes. Where is the will to shape outcomes? The readiness to act? Not visible. Because of this, Europe is not a serious power. It is a spectator handing the world to actors like the IRGC, to those who institutionalize violence, export terror, and spit on every norm you claim to defend. If Europe wants to be a geopolitical actor, it must act, decide, and yes, use force when required. But right now, Europe equals weakness. That's a shame for us, and that's a shame for the ordinary people in Iran. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Dann erhält jetzt
Thank you. And now our colleague Agile Martinez has the floor, to be followed by our colleague Sheva. President Costa, the European Council, I think, sent out some important messages of unity on trade agreements, competition, single market, protection of industry. Some time ago, we were also talking about the energy market. And so I'm going to focus on the more humanitarian drama that we are living, and we're going to continue to live if the conflict in the Middle East continues, which is going to create millions of displaced people in precarious conditions, inhuman conditions even. Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank. Let's not forget Ukraine. Tomorrow, when we're talking about the returns directive for migrants, we would ask that please we should talk with the dignity, the humanity that this deserves. Because, yes, we need order in migratory processes, but we also need dignity. Thank you.
das Wort erhält nun.
Thank you. And now our colleague Scherber, to be followed by our colleague Montero.
Micro, please.
Szanowny Panie Przewodniczący.
Mr. President, Honorable Chamber, first of all, we cannot remain silent in the face of a situation when a member state, Hungary, and Orban's government are blocking aid for Ukraine in combat. 90 billion is something that we dearly need, and we need to find a way to give Ukraine the funds that they need to protect themselves and to function well. Yesterday in Lviv, drones fell, destroying monuments that are listed on the UNESCO list of monuments. Churches from the 17th century, St. Andrew Church among them, 80 kilometers from the border of Poland only. Today, we heard another scandal from the Orban's government, namely stopping the possibility to provide this country with gas. So we have to take a decision, being fully conscious of the fact that the Troy horse of Putin is here in Europe and is the corrupt government of Hungary.
Dankeschön. Nun spricht die Kollegin.
Thank you. And now our colleague Montero, and if our colleague Zipa can prepare.
Gracias, Presidenta. Señores.
Thank you, President, Commissioners, Mr. Costa, President of the Council. Israel has announced that it will be conquering the south of Lebanon, and no one's doing anything about it here. The finance minister is calling for annexation of 10% of Lebanese territory, and you are doing nothing. They have forcibly displaced 600,000 Lebanese citizens. They have destroyed bridges. They have destroyed motorways. And what are you doing, commissioners? Gaza, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, energy prices skyrocketing. And you have what it takes to stop this, but you're not doing it. You are enabling illegal wars for oil, for business. And what's worse, you actually are complicit, because without your support, Trump and Netanyahu wouldn't be able to sow terror the way they're doing in the world. Why are you on your knees before this phenomenon? What are you doing? You're a group of bureaucrats. You're incapable of doing anything fair or just. You're incapable of putting forward a solution. Why can't you put a cap on food prices, on energy prices? Please, Europe has what it takes to change the way things are going. It's time to turn our backs on the US and Israel. We need to stop them in their tracks now. If not, tomorrow it will be too late and our people will pay the price.
Schön, und nun erhält das Wort der Kollege Sieber.
Thank you. And now Mr. Sieber.
In this house, we often honor great statesmen, and sometimes it's only fair to prepare an eulogy for their career, maybe just a little early. We praise the man who calmed the press with grace by gently putting questions in their place, who cherished votes, the ritual, the show, as long as all results were safe to know, who built the rule of law so firm, so tight, that law would always bend to power's might, who spoke of freedom proudly, loud and clear, while making sure dissent would disappear, who guarded tradition as a sacred art by redrafting history to play his part, who promised strength, stability, control, and slowly centralized the state, the soul, who called it patriotism, bold and grand, when fewer voices shaped the public land. And so, dear colleagues, let us not complain, but wish Viktor Orban a well-earned rest from strain. Europe, I am sure, will gladly entertain the thought he'll soon have time for himself again. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Und nun erhält...
Thank you. And now for the Commission, Commissioner Dombrovskis.
Madam Chair, President Costa, honourable members, well, to start on a lighter note, I'm attending European Parliament plenaries since 2004. I think it's the first time I hear members' intervention as a poem. But in any case, thank you, honourable members, for your valuable contributions to today's debate. And across all the issues we discuss today, one message stands out clearly, that the European Union must act with determination in increasingly unstable and challenging world. Our unwavering support to Ukraine remains at the core of our efforts. As Ukraine continues to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, the European Union will stand firmly by its side politically, financially, economically and militarily as long as it takes. At the same time, we remain committed to increasing pressure on the aggressor Russia and to further weaken its capacity to sustain its war economy. The European Union is also responding to the deeply concerning developments in the Middle East. The situation in the region is extremely serious, with risks that extend far beyond its borders. We call for de-escalation, maximum restraint and the protection of civilians. At the same time, we are stepping up our humanitarian support to those affected while standing in solidarity with our partners in the region and also our member states that have been directly impacted. These external challenges have direct consequences for Europe, not least in the field of energy. This is why we are taking targeted and practical measures to mitigate high energy prices for citizens and businesses. From greater flexibility in state aid to action on grid charges, taxation and carbon pricing, the Commission is working across all levers to ensure a more affordable, secure and resilient energy system. At the same time, we know that Europe's strength in the world depends on its economic foundations at home. Deepening the single market, cutting unnecessary administrative burdens and creating better conditions for companies to innovate and grow remain our core priority. With initiatives such as One Europe, One Market and the EU Inc. proposal, we are moving decisively to unlock Europe's full economic potential and boost its global competitiveness. Simplification remains at the heart of these efforts, delivering tangible savings and real benefits for businesses and citizens alike. Taken together, these actions form a part of a broader strategy to ensure that Europe remains resilient, sovereign and capable of acting in a rapidly changing world. This means reducing strategic dependencies, strengthening our industrial and technological base and addressing critical capability gaps. In this context of the further deteriorating geopolitical environment, with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continuing to pose an existential challenge to the European Union, the European Council has reaffirmed its determination to decisively ramp up Europe's defence readiness by 2030. We will continue to act with unity, urgency and purpose. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank. Das letzte Wort.
Thank you. And now for the Council, President Costa.
Thank you very much. I will focus on the four main issues that you raised during the debate. Para empezar, voy a hablar sobre la situación en Oriente Medio.
Well, I want to talk about the situation in the Middle East. Europe needs to have a clear position and it cannot show double standards. It has to be clear in speaking out in defense of international law when Russia invades Ukraine or when Iran attacks its neighbours in the Gulf or in the near Middle East. Europe has to promote peace, and that's why we are calling on everyone to de-escalate, for Israel to talk with the Lebanese authorities to coordinate the disarmament of Hezbollah and to respect Lebanon's territorial integrity. We are calling for peace, and we're grateful for Greece, France, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, who have sent military units to defend Cyprus, a member of this union that has been attacked by Hezbollah. But we have to say no to war, but say yes to a fair peace in Ukraine. In other words, Russia has to respect sovereignty and internationally recognized borders in Ukraine and its territorial integrity. But it also means that we need to have an effective two-state solution which will allow the Palestinians to be free and independent and live in peace with their Israeli neighbours. And we have to defend human rights. Human rights belong to everyone, everyone around the entire globe. So we have to defend them. We have to defend them clearly. From the first moment, whether it were the European Commission or ourselves, we've taken good note of the situation in terms of energy security, which started with the destruction of oil pipelines by Russia as well. We've made sure that it was possible to use a gas pipeline coming through to the Adriatic. And that has replaced the Odessa one. Secondly, we have to create adequate conditions in order to repair the gas pipeline with technical and financial support for Ukraine as it conducts the repair, with guarantees from President Zelensky that this pipeline will then be effectively repaired over the next few weeks. And that's important for Europe because the decision to suspend the use of Russian gas for Slovakia and Hungary was very important. Every unit of gas which is bought from Russia means money that we are sending to Russia for it to continue to finance the war in Ukraine. But when Russia attacks Druzhba, or if there's a war in the Middle East and Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, yes, it results in an energy crisis and bills increase. But it's not the reform of the ETS that's going to solve all of this. Look at energy that we can produce. That's the only means we have to guarantee our energy sovereignty, our autonomy. Certainly, we have to reassess the ETS, and the Commission by June is going to provide a proposal on that. But the situation in the Middle East, I think, prompts us to ask the Commission to table some short-term measures in order to reduce the price of fuel. Now, from a legal point of view, there's a clear violation of the Treaty of the functioning of the European Union that we're seeing now. It's politically unacceptable because no one has the right to hold us hostage, to blackmail the EU, or to use us as an instrument in electoral campaign. But also the legal dimension, because when the treaties call for unanimity, it's all about a veto, because we have to bring together the various different provisions in the treaty which impose on all of us the duty to cooperate fairly. In other words, the duty on all of us to make the effort to achieve an agreement. The treaties also force us to sincerely cooperate between the different institutions. And if the European Council takes a decision by consensus on the 18th of December, and when it asks the European Parliament the permission to change the budget, when the European Parliament grants the possibility of changing the budget, no one then can hold up a decision which is in the pipeline underway and which only remains to be formalized, because the European Parliament has given its consent in the very specific terms requested by Council. And finally, we have to act in good faith. And it's not acting in good faith when conditions are imposed upon us that don't depend either on a member state or on an institution, but rather on Ukraine's capacity to repair the pipeline and Russia's will to destroy it once again, or maybe not. We should not forget that Russia has already attacked the pipeline 23 times. And we cannot, in our decisions, depend on decisions taken by Russia. That we simply cannot accept. For our growth, our competitiveness, for European jobs, it's absolutely crucial that we look to our trade policies, but also for our agriculture. Because through trade policy, we open up new markets for our cheese, our wine, our agricultural products. And in our trade agreements, obviously, we clearly have to protect our interests, particularly in agriculture. And that's what we did with Mercosur. Because we're talking about Mercosur, but we very often forget that when we're talking about beef, there is a 1.5% quota. When we talk about sugar, there's a quota of less than 2%. Milk, less than 2% quota, again. And it's the same with Australia, because there, once again, there will be quotas. Finally,
in spite of the world instability, we keep our focus on our own agenda. And it's what we have done last week in the European Council. Because in spite of the crisis in Iran, if the war or the war in Ukraine, we keep our focus to launch one Europe, one market agenda with concrete measures and a very clear timeline. Very demanding timeline. Because we need to deliver until the end of 2027, and mainly of these measures we need to take this year of 2026. I don't repeat again what I have said in my first speech, but we need to deliver on this in order to sustain our social model, in order to create quality jobs, in order to ensure affordability in our society for our citizens, and to invest in our own security and our own defense. We have an agenda, we have a clear commitment from the European Commission, and now it's up to us, Council and the European Parliament, to deliver in this concrete time, because Europe, our economy, our citizens cannot wait for more time. Thank you very much.
Herzlichen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you very much indeed, President. That concludes the debate. And I say goodbye to Commissioner Dombrovskis and welcome Commissioner Labib. The next item on the agenda is a European Citizens' Initiative entitled Ban on Conversion Practices in the European Union. Let's just reshuffle.